Welcome everyone to another Chats with Charnie. This week we're continuing with our series dealing with work stresses. We have a special guest, Claudine Primo, who is a graduate recruiter, will be helping us on today's session. I'm super excited for this. I've known Claudine for many years since I started my journey. So without any further ado, Claudine, tell the viewers more about yourself. Tell us what you're passionate about and what is it that you do.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's so exciting for me to just be part of this journey with you. As you mentioned, I've known you for such a long time. So just a brief introduction to your viewers. My name is Claudine, as you mentioned. I've been in the space of graduate recruitment for just over 12 years. Saying that out loud each time makes me feel super old. I promise you I'm not. But I think that just speaks to my passion in terms of working with young people such as yourself, because I really find pleasure in helping people like you to just find the right platform to kickstart your career, especially graduates, because I think it's such a big decision to make and it shouldn't be a decision that you take lightly. There's a lot of research you need to do. There's a lot of information that you need to get to help you make an informed decision, because essentially that really sets the foundation for your career going forward. So I think that's why I've probably been in this industry for just over 12 years, and I think that encapsulates who I am and what I'm quite passionate about.
100%. Claudine is all about making you feel comfortable, all about helping you and preparing you on your journey. And I only have fond memories of Claudine when I started out on this extensive journey on becoming a chartered accountant. So, Claudine, I guess let's just get into the interview ASAP. So, first question for you, Claudine, and these questions are compiled by myself as well as some of the Instagram viewers and my friends. So, first question, when you get the email requesting an interview, what is the first thing you should search on the internet?
All right. So first and foremost, congratulations on getting that email. It means that your CV has stood out from the many applications received by that organization. So just take a moment and feel that pride, like, girl or guy, you did that, you got it, you know?
Yes.
But then also at the same moment, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't immediately think, what do I need to go and research now? I think first and foremost, go through the interview email that you received to confirm the details. Make sure that you add it to your calendar so you don't forget, so that it is diarized. But then also make sure that you know what exactly will be expected of you in the interview. So is it a face-to-face interview, or is it a virtual interview? Is it something that you're going to have to use Teams or Zoom for? And make sure that that has been confirmed up front. And then secondly, I think it is important to know who will be in the interview. So if it is a panel interview, will it just be a first round interview with HR, or will it be with business? Because essentially that's also going to help you mentally prepare and know how to like psych yourself up to like, okay, it's just an introduction email, it's just introduction interview with HR, but maybe it's actually with the business, with the partner, with the manager, and you're like, okay, no, now I need to actually bring my A game. Not that you have to with HR, but it just means that you have to just prepare yourself a little differently as to whether or not it is a first round introduction interview or whether it is actually a final interview with business.
Yeah.
And then I think then your research will start in terms of understanding what it is that you need to know about the organization and about the role. But I trust that you've done that before you applied, because that would have attracted your application in the first place. But now it's really just time to go into more detail in terms of knowing what exactly it is that the team does. Are there any accolades that you'd like to bring up in the interview that you'd like to chat about? Because that will also help you inform your decision or your passion in the interview as to why you want to join this organization. And you'll bring that across in the interview. So I think that's very important. And then just back on my previous point in terms of understanding the requirements of the interview, it is also important just to know, is it going to be a psychometric assessment that will be expected? Perhaps a case study that you need to do, that you need to prepare for. So also just understanding the format of the interview, because that will also help you prepare for that. So yeah, I think that covers very much what you need to research and what you need to go and look for on the interview in terms of going online and checking what it is that you need to find out a bit more of.
That is super helpful. Thank you so much, Claudine. Especially the part, and this resonates a lot with me because I just experienced it. One of the clients that I was interviewing for asked me, what is it that stands out to you about our company? So this wasn't the actual company I was applying for, it was one of the clients. And I had to have known about the business. I had to have known about the slogan, what drives the business, what's the business passionate about, what is it that basically beams out of their website, because that is all I had at the time. And I had to have an answer like extremely quickly. Even though it wasn't the actual company I was applying for, it was the client. So I think that is extremely important. And also the fact that read the email. What does the email tell you about? I know I've had emails about make sure that you check your sound, make sure that you look professional, that you have professional attire on. This is the link. Check all these links before you actually join on the call. So that is super important. Thank you so much, Claudine. It's very insightful. And I think it will help the viewers tremendously, especially since so many of us, and I say us because I'm included in that group, currently looking for employment. Next question. What are some of the most typical questions asked relating to soft skills?
So I was thinking a lot about that one, Chanel, and I think when you first want to identify what skills the organization will ask you about, and I think that comes back to my previous response about researching the role that you apply for, because very often in the job spec, the organization will tell you exactly what it is that they need from the successful candidate. So they will tell you if they're looking for somebody who is able to collaborate, they're looking for somebody who has very strong technical skills, they're looking for somebody who is able to work in a team. So you'll definitely try and prepare based off your job spec in terms of what soft skills you need to prepare for. But I think in terms of the actual interview, generally when people try and assess your soft skills in an interview, they'll make use of what we call competency-based questions. And when responding to a competency-based question, you need to make use of what we call the STAR technique. And the STAR technique is generally where you tell the interviewer about what the situation was, what task was required of you, what action you took, and what the result was. So now when answering a competency-based question, it's very important to not go too far off on tangent about what the situation was, but try and keep your response as concise and as to the point as possible. And generally the interviewer will phrase a question like this by telling you, give me an example of, tell me about a time. And that's why it is very important that you give an holistic view in terms of what the situation was, what you did, and what the final outcome was, so that they can get an understanding about how exactly you dealt with or how you displayed that specific soft skill.
Okay, that's awesome. I've actually, during my search in terms of preparing for interviews, the STAR technique came up quite a bit. So I actually did it the way I do, like a SWOT analysis. So I would draw my quadrants and make sure that I had all the information and everything. And I think it definitely does help, because I know I've been asked that question many times. So tell us about the situation where you've had conflict. Tell us about the time when you didn't agree with a manager or you didn't agree with a partner. How did you approach that type of situation? So I definitely think that STAR technique would help a lot. I know that it's helped me in my journey as well. So thank you for that, Claudine.
Yeah, and just on that, Chanel, I think very often candidates sometimes overthink the question because, like you mentioned, you know, when it is a very difficult question in terms of how you dealt with conflict or how you dealt with a really difficult person, they're very scared or hesitant to not put themselves in a bad light. But I think what is important is that when you prepare for that, that you think about a really good example of how you handle that situation well, but also in terms of highlighting what some of your learnings was following that experience. So let's say, for example, like you mentioned, in terms of dealing with a really difficult person, you tell the interviewer what happened, how you dealt with it, and what the outcome was. And you can then also just like conclude that your response in terms of saying, you know, coming out of that experience, I really learned that it is important to set aside my emotions, for example, and just deal with the person based on facts and not necessarily getting all personal in terms of dealing with the individual, but rather dealing with the conflict itself.
Yeah, and that is so super important to separate like your emotion from the facts when it comes to conflict. I know because I've dealt with that in the past as well. And you literally have to be like, okay, relationships are important to me, but right now, this is what needs to be done. This is the work that needs to be completed. And this is the type of relationship that we have to have for this particular time. Once it's over, then we can get into let's solve our conflict completely. So thank you. So question number 3, Claudine. With the job market being so volatile, especially amid COVID-19, what are companies looking for in new applicants?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, as a candidate, you need to also understand the market and understand that many companies are not doing too great. Some companies are laying off people. So if they are recruiting, it really means that they're looking for absolutely fabulous candidates. And the fact that you were selected for that role, it means that you are somebody that they're looking for. And when you come to the interview stage, what I think is important is understanding the industry that you're applying to and taking into consideration how COVID may have impacted that industry. So my response to your question really, Chanel, is quite generic in terms of understanding that in any organization, taking into consideration that we've just gone through a pandemic, but at the same time, we've pretty much been forced to now embrace the fourth industrial revolution in terms of being tech savvy and being willing and able to now adapt in terms of making use of technology, and not necessarily as some people may feel in terms of conflicting with technology, feeling like technology is going to take over the world and that there won't be a need for people anymore, but rather understanding how we can collaborate and work in partnership with technology. So in response to that, I think three really three important skills comes to mind, and that being, and I love acronyms, so I've come up with three in terms of AIR, and so A being agile, and as I mentioned, being adaptable, being able to really make use of technology, being adaptable to learning something new, getting out of your comfort zone, and understanding that now, yes, amidst the COVID pandemic, we are now needing to actually really just make ourselves more competitive in the market and upskilling ourselves. So making use of this time to really see what opportunities are available for us. But then also perhaps in the next one being being innovative, understanding where there may be a need and how your skills match the need, whether it be in an organization, whether it be in society, within your community, and how you are able to then partner with that and keep yourself involved and not necessarily wait for someone to bring an opportunity to you. And then that speaks to my last one, being being resilient, being able to just bounce back. So let's say, for example, you are being laid off, unfortunately, and you are waiting for another job opportunity to come up. As I mentioned earlier, see where there is a need and how you can then match your skills in the meanwhile till something does become available, because that will also speak to how resilient you are in terms of selling yourself in an interview. They'll ask you, so what have you done in the last 3 months, for example? You can say, look, I've identified in my community in terms of upskilling entrepreneurs or small businesses, for example. That speaks to your character. It speaks to how you are able to still be innovative. And that is the kind of person that any organization would want, because it means that you're not going to sit and wait for somebody to come to you and say, I need you to do A, B, and C, but you can already come in and say, I've thought of X, Y, and Z already in terms of how we can actually make things happen a little bit more efficiently, and also bring in your creativity. And I think that's very important.
So I completely resonate with what you're saying. It makes complete sense. And I think that a lot of us are in the situation now where we're waiting for something to come our way. But we should actually be proactive about it, and we should take initiative, and we should be innovative in the things that we do, so that when that question is asked of us in that interview, we can say, I've done X, Y, and Z, and this is the reasons, and this is the results of what I've done. So that is awesome advice. Thank you, Claudine. For our fourth question, when the interviewer asks if you have any questions, what are they actually looking for you to ask? Or is this just your opportunity to find out more about your work environment? And does this leave a bad impression if you do not answer, or if you do not have any questions?
So I don't think as a candidate you need to think about what is it that the interviewer would like you to ask. I think this is really an opportunity for you to get as much information as you can to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not this really is the organization you want to be part of. So I think in preparing a question or two, I would say a maximum of 3, for this part of the interview, I think it is important to really just reflect in terms of what is it that you're passionate about, and try and link it and get as much information out of the interview in terms of you making a decision. So I think based on your research that we did in terms of my first response, in terms of what the organization's about, what some of the accolades are, this is your opportunity to ask about that. But more importantly, I think it also speaks to your values in terms of what's important to you. So the questions that you ask here is questions that A, you won't get an answer on from the website, or B, that the HR people won't be able to answer via email. So don't ask questions that you would be able to get from that kind of platform. Here is really an opportunity for you to converse and to have a proper engagement with somebody firsthand from the organization in terms of what's important to you. So I think, let's say, for example, you're quite passionate about inclusivity, for example, and that is perhaps one of the values of the organization. This is your opportunity to ask, how do they display that inclusivity? What is it that they're doing in terms of encouraging that in the organization? So I think here's really just about you, and it's really just about you getting as much information as possible to help you make an informed decision about the role and about the organization.
That is awesome. I usually love this time to ask them about their culture, because I know culture is always important to me. So I always want to know, like, how do they see their employees, and what is it that drives the business to succeed? And even in my last set of interviews, I was actually asked to ask about the culture by the company that I was trying to get employment with a client. Ask them about their culture, ask them about what's currently going on with COVID, when do they expect to go back to work? Questions like that. How are they dealing with the technology and all of those things amidst COVID-19? So that is awesome advice. Thank you, Claudine. As usual, thank you. Last question. Speaking about culture, what is the best way to bring up company culture and values in an interview?
Yeah, so I think that definitely speaks to my previous response in terms of the opportunity to ask questions. That is where that definitely will come up. But I think, let's say, for example, you get to the point of where you are extended an offer, for example, there's no harm in asking them if you could perhaps meet the team, if there's an opportunity for you to maybe just take a walk through the organization, just to get a feel, because I think that's the best way for you to really get a sense of the organization itself. But I think as part of your research as well, leading up to your application or into your interview, I think it is important for you to speak to people in the organization if you do know anybody. If not, and I speak from a graduate perspective, if there are career fair opportunities, if there are graduate employers that you can perhaps reach out to and ask them if you can speak to a trainee if you don't know anybody in the organization. But I say this with a pinch of salt, because remember, each one's experience is different, and how you may perceive culture may be different to the next person. But I think it does give you the basis to help you make a more informed decision. But then, secondly, I think what's important is experiencing culture for yourself. If you are fortunate enough to have a face-to-face interview, if you are fortunate enough to go into the company's building, for example, you get to see how the receptionist greets you and welcomes you. You'll get to see how the business partner or manager treats, let's say, for example, the HR staff in the interview. There already you get a sense in terms of how the culture is and how they deal and treat the people. And I think that for me is very important. If you're not fortunate enough from that aspect, I think you do get a sense from how HR corresponds with you. That's also very important. So are they quite efficient? Are they quite on top of things? And I often kid with students when I interview them, and they're always so nervous, and I'm like, guys, I'm under more pressure than you are. And they're like, why? And I'm like, if you don't get a good experience with me as an interviewer in this interview, it speaks volumes to the reputation of the firm and the organization. I'm a representation of the culture. I'm your first point of contact in terms of what the firm stands for. And I think that is very important in terms of your engagement in the interview and with the interviewer. That is also where you get a sense of the culture.
No, that's awesome. And that is so true. A lot of the time you look at your interviewer, you look at how they are responding to you, how they treat you in the interview, how they speak to you over the phone, especially if you're doing like phone calls and people aren't, because I've actually noticed people don't like video calls that much. but you can see it in their tone, you can hear in their tone, how they approach you, if you like the certain environment that they are trying to offer you or not. So I think that's super helpful. Thank you, Claudine.
And just on that, Chanel, I think it's also important to trust your gut. If you're in an interview and you just feel like it's too stiff, or, oh, I really don't see myself here, trust your gut. We individuals, we are all feeling a very different vibe when we engage with somebody, and I think it is just important that you trust your feeling.
No, 100% agree. Claudine, before we go on to our rapid 30-second questions, which I know you're super excited for, do you have any last tips and advice that you'd like to give the viewers in terms of preparing for an interview and anything else? Anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, Chanel. Yes, I definitely do have some advice I'd like to share with your viewers. I think just before we go into the interview, I think as your application process, make sure that you don't just use one CV for all applications. Remember to tailor your application. And I'm not saying lie on your CV, because please, you are going to get caught out. It's not going to reflect well on you. However, when I say tailor your CV, I mean really just highlighting certain things that are more pertinent to the role that you're applying for. So as a graduate, for example, when you're applying for a part-time job, what that organization is looking for is very different to when you're applying for a graduate program, for example. So tailor your CV to what you're applying for. Don't just have a one-size-fits-all approach. And the same for experience hires. So if I look at yourself, for example, Chanel, when you're applying for audit positions, you will obviously highlight your audit experience. But if you're applying for a more general financial services application, you will then obviously highlight other skills that are more pertinent to that kind of environment. Yeah, so I think that for me is very different, important. And then when you look to the interview, I think it is very important that you come in knowing who you are as an individual. Don't come in being prepared to give the answers that you think the interviewer wants to hear. Be prepared to sell yourself. Be prepared to bring across your most authentic self. Remember, you stood out. You are the one that got the interview. Be prepared to speak to what's on your CV. Be prepared to highlight what you have indicated on your CV. But be very careful of not forcing an opportunity to bring those things across in the interview. Wait for the question to come out as an opportunity, but don't bring it across because you feel like you've prepared this response and therefore you're going to bring it up. Make sure that the opportunity arises and that interview comes across, but that answer comes across. But I think it is just important for me as an interviewer that you bring your most authentic self across. Don't come across as a robot. Don't come across as, if some organizations do ask you, be straightforward, what are some of your strengths? Don't just list them. Package your response. Make sure that you give an example. Make sure that you are able to display how you were able to demonstrate that specific strength and why it is so important to you that you now wanted to bring that up, for example. Don't just say, I'm hardworking. Yeah, and how you're hardworking. Make sure that you are able to say that, I consider myself quite a hardworking individual, having to manage a part-time job to support my family, and also being able to maintain 8 distinctions in my matric year while still doing tutoring on the side, for example.
Yeah,
make sure that you give
hardworking.
Make sure that you give context to that specific skill that you are bringing across in your response. And make sure that you always have a glass of water. Now, some people may feel a bit nervous having a glass of water in an interview because you don't want them to see your hands trembling because you're so nervous. But I think it is just important to buy yourself some time to take a sip of water while you process and formulate your response. Communication is key, and I think that's also one of the most important soft skills that they won't necessarily ask you straightforward about, but they are assessing throughout the interview. So it is important that you are able to articulate yourself well, that your responses are as concise but still comprehensive enough for them to get as much information as possible. And I think that for me is very important. Very often kids are so nervous and they just don't know how to bring their most authentic self across. Like, how do I show you I'm a fun person? How do I bring my bubbly personality across? So for example, if you are on a Zoom interview, it's very different to really bring that energy across, but it shows when you smile, when you're friendly. It shows when you're a little animated, not too much, in how you're engaging with the interview. And I think that is how you bring your personality across. And I think that is also very important.
Oh, thank you so much, Claudine, for that advice. I think it's so important that you prepare yourself to prepare for the interview. So if you are somebody who's generally nervous and you're a bit shaky, clench your fingers together, put it on your lap, don't fold your arms because it shows that you're closed off, and just be open to what is being asked. And like you said, don't lead the interviewer in asking you certain questions so that you can force one of the response that you've come up with previously while you were preparing. Wait for it to happen organically, naturally, and also bring across your personality in the interview. I think
Yeah, and on that, Chanel, I think the most general question that freaks anyone out, and myself included, because I'm quite an introverted person, is when the interviewer starts the interview and asks you to tell you, like, tell us about yourself, and they're like, oh my gosh, what now?
Why?
Like, where do I even start? And really, that speaks to what you just said, Chanel. It's the importance of bringing your authentic self across. That is what the organization wants to know when they ask you, tell us about yourself. They don't want you to tell them about, I'm a hardworking person and I'm a BCom graduate and no. We saw that on your CV. Now's your time to tell us who you are as an individual. What stood out about you? So that's where you speak about, I enjoy hockey, I do this in the spare time, I really love sightseeing, because it really just gives them a more holistic view in terms of who you are as an individual.
And that you're not all about work,
Exactly,
but that you have
you're a
some
balanced
balance in your life as
individual.
well. Yeah, no, love it. So, Claudine, we are now off to the section that you really can't wait for, that you are so excited for, because you get to tell us a bit more about yourself and in your 30-second rapid question. So, let's get to sharing the screen. Can you see can you see my screen? Can you see the timer?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
I'm
great.
ready.
You're ready? Okay. What are you most grateful for?
My husband.
What is your favorite Bible verse or reference?
Proverbs.
What is your dream destination?
Greece.
What is your favorite place?
Garden route.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Who's your hero?
My dad.
What's your last meal?
Cornflakes.
Favorite movie?
The one with the yellow and black stripes.
The answer is Me Before You. I think
Even remember that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, we knew what I was talking about.
My goodness. So you got, in completion, you got 7 questions, Claudine. You answered 7 questions.
That's not too bad, right?
Well, Claudine, I was expecting from you, since you are fast one,
Yeah,
I was
no, man.
expecting like 10 or something.
Next time.
Next time. But thank you so much, Claudine, for being a part of Chats with Charnie. I appreciate it so much. And I think that the viewers will really appreciate your advice, your input, your experiences, and just like all the tips and techniques that you've given us on how to prepare for an interview. You are so valued and so appreciated. And I wish you all the best for carrying on during COVID, being a recruiter and encouraging others and advising others. I think that you're doing a great job. You definitely did a great job with me. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chanel, and all the best to you and all your viewers as well with the job search. Don't get discouraged. There are companies who are looking for people. The right one will come up. Just stay patient and just keep pushing through.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.